Had to get the double tap today. A lot of people are walking around, so the rare double tap. Good morning. Welcome to the June 2026 open meeting of the Federal Communications Commission. As is our tradition, if you'll please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Great. Well, we got a bit of a full house today, both exciting items, I'm sure, but also it's intern season at the FCC, so welcome to all the FCC interns. For better or worse, I started at the FCC as an intern all the way back in, I think, 2002, if you can believe it, a long, long time ago. So welcome to all the interns. We'll have some more announcements later on that. But with that opening, Madam Secretary, would you please introduce this morning's agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to you and good morning, commissioners. For today's meeting, you will hear 5 items for your consideration. First, you will consider a notice of proposed rulemaking to eliminate barriers to wireline deployment. Second, you will consider a notice of proposed rulemaking on measures to protect children when using E-rate funded networks, and a further notice of proposed rulemaking to strengthen E-rate program integrity and streamline administration. Third, you will consider a second report and order and second further notice of proposed rulemaking to improve reliability and interoperability in the nation's next generation 911 transition. Fourth, you will consider a report and order and further notice of proposed rulemaking to modernize the emergency alert system and wireless emergency alerts. Fifth, you will consider a second report and order and second further notice of proposed rulemaking that would accelerate build-out of secure submarine cable infrastructure. Today's first item is titled Cutting Red Tape and Accelerating the Build-Out of Wireline Infrastructure, and will be presented by the Wireline Competition Bureau. Joseph Calashone, Bureau Chief, will give the introduction.
Thank you, and Chief Calashone, when you're ready, please proceed.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. The Wireline Competition Bureau is pleased to present for your consideration a notice of proposed rulemaking that would propose and seek comment on rules to prevent state and local statutes, regulations, and legal requirements from impeding the provision of telecommunication services in violation of Section 253 of the Communications Act. I'd like to thank the entire Bureau team for their hard work on this item, as well as our colleagues throughout the Commission for their helpful input. Joining me at the table from the Wireline Competition Bureau are Jody May, Competition Policy Division Chief, Liz Dragula, Special Counsel, and Jesse Goodwin, Attorney Advisor, who will now present the item.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. To build out to consumers, providers must obtain authorizations from state and local governments to deploy facilities in the public rights-of-way and use them to provide service. In some cases, approvals can take months or even years. Additionally, authorization fees and other forms of compensation that are unrelated to the costs of managing the public rights-of-way have resulted in financial burdens that have disincentivized deployment. If adopted, this notice of proposed rulemaking would advance the Commission's Build America agenda by proposing and seeking comment on rules that would prevent state and local statutes, regulations, and legal requirements from having the effect of prohibiting the provision of wireline telecommunication services in violation of Section 253 of the Communications Act. Specifically, this notice of proposed rulemaking would propose and seek comment on establishing a rebuttable presumption that state and local governments have effectively prohibited the provision of wireline telecommunication services if they fail to process all authorizations for use of public rights-of-way within 120 days. Propose and seek comment on limiting fees that state and local governments may charge for an authorization to a reasonable approximation of the government's actual direct costs of managing the public rights-of-way with respect to that authorization, and establish safe harbor fee levels that presumptively comport with that standard. Propose and seek comment on requiring that the value of in-kind compensation demanded by state and local governments count toward any safe harbor fee levels established by the Commission. seek comment on prohibiting state and local governments from imposing additional requirements on wireline telecommunications infrastructure deployments on the grounds that that infrastructure may be used to provide other services, and invite comment on the Commission's authority to enact these proposals. The Bureau recommends adoption of this notice of proposed rulemaking and requests editorial privileges. Thank you.
Thanks. We'll now hear comments from the bench, starting with Commissioner Gomez.
Accelerating broadband deployment is a bipartisan priority. It is incumbent upon the FCC to ensure the timely build-out of wireline infrastructure, the backbone of the reliable, high-speed connectivity necessary for the U.S. to be a global leader in artificial intelligence. That being said, this issue is complicated and it requires us to carefully balance competing interests. On the one hand, providers seeking assistance from the Commission to bring broadband to communities as fast as possible, and on the other, states and localities face large volumes of requests that they may or may not have the resources to respond to as rapidly as providers would like. I'm pleased that the Commission is seeking comment on how to ensure that communities are connected quickly and efficiently while being realistic about the burdens on states and localities. However, as I've expressed before, I'm dubious about the Commission's authority under Section 253 to use rulemaking to preempt states and localities when it comes to their management of rights-of-ways and fees charged to providers for a couple of reasons. It is unclear whether Congress intended to confer on the Commission preemption authority over local management of public rights-of-way or over state and local governments' requirement of compensation from providers. In Section 253D, Congress authorized the Commission to preempt the enforcement of a state or local government's specific statute, regulation, or legal requirement if it violates 253A or B. There is a question of whether this allows preemption of state or local management of public rights of way or the requirement of fair and reasonable compensation from providers which are protected under 253C. Congress, in its drafting of Section 253, indicated its intention to narrow the preemption authority to subsections A and B and to make clear that local powers should be retained locally. As legislative history suggests, Congress may have meant for 253C to allow for companies to pay for the use of public property and for states and localities to be in charge of pricing access to their rights of way, perhaps beyond actual and direct costs. In the NPRM at hand, the Commission proposes to adopt a presumption that any failure by a state or local government to act by a specified deadline on applications for authorizations to access and use public rights of way constitutes a violation of 253A. It also tentatively concludes that fees that exceed direct and actual costs violate 253A and C. I'm interested in hearing from outside parties about whether this constitutes an expansion of the Commission's preemption authority over rights that Congress intended to reserve for the states. Lastly, the language of Section 253D allows the Commission, upon determination that a state or local government has permitted or imposed any statute, regulation, or legal requirement that violates subsection A or B, to preempt the enforcement of such statute, regulation, or legal requirement. A plain reading of the text seems to suggest that the Commission has the authority to preempt on a case-by-case basis as it identifies individual state or local initiatives that violate 253A or B, rather than using rulemaking authority to issue a blanket preemption under 253D. I hope commenters will opine on whether this reading is likely to survive judicial scrutiny under Loper Bright as the best interpretation of Section 253D, without which it is unclear the Commission has a basis to issue rule-based preemptions. Since this item is still at the NPRM stage, it has my support. I remain very interested in reviewing the comments as they come in to determine what the Commission's role should be in accelerating broadband deployment. And I thank the Wireline Competition Bureau for their work on this item.
Thank you, Commissioner. We'll now hear from Commissioner Trusty.
Thank you. I've often heard from broadband providers who identified the time and expense associated with state and local permitting as significant barriers to deployment. At the same time, some providers have cited examples where they've worked collaboratively with a state or local government to develop solutions that advance both broadband deployment and other local priorities. When providers and permitting authorities work together in ways that serve both broadband policy goals and the interests of state and local communities, that is a positive outcome.
Achieving that outcome consistently, however, has proven to be challenging. According to the latest data from the Census Bureau, there are more than 90,000 local governments in the United States. FCC data indicate that as of June 2025, more than 2,000 broadband providers operate nationwide. While not every provider interacts with every jurisdiction, those figures underscore the sheer number of relationships involved and the many opportunities for misunderstandings, delays, and disputes to arise. I prefer a more optimistic perspective. I see opportunities for those interactions to succeed, for permitting authorities to create a path for timely and efficient broadband deployment, and providers to follow through on commitments to bring the connectivity communities need, while also ensuring that rights of way are responsibly maintained for the benefit of everyone who relies upon them. I view this notice of proposed rulemaking as an important step in that direction. Clear rules explaining how the Commission interprets and applies Section 253 can provide a more predictable framework for discussions between providers and permitting authorities, helping both sides reach workable solutions before disagreements escalate into litigation. Such rules can also offer valuable guidance to jurisdictions with less experience processing communications infrastructure applications or with limited staff resources. And when unreasonable costs or delays do occur, clear rules can provide a more direct path forward for the Commission and the courts to take corrective action consistent with federal law. By proceeding through notice and comment rulemaking, the Commission can benefit from a broader range of perspectives than would be available through individual preemption proceedings. I look forward to hearing from providers, state and local governments, consumer advocates, and other stakeholders as we work to fulfill our responsibilities under the Communications Act. I also look forward to reviewing the record developed in this proceeding and to working with Congress as it considers additional permitting reforms. I thank the staff of the Wireline Competition Bureau for their excellent work on this item.
Thank you, Commissioner. For years, we've pushed for a two-part playbook to ensure America's leadership in 5G and other next-generation technologies. First, we need more spectrum in the commercial marketplace, and we've been making really good progress on that front lately. Just this week, we announced the conclusion of our successful AWS 3 auction, where bidding beat expectations and brought in bids exceeding $3.5 billion. We got more to come on the spectrum front, too. Second, we need permitting reform. And today we're continuing our work on that front by tackling unnecessary barriers that only slow down the build-out of broadband infrastructure. The reality is straightforward. Americans want better, faster, affordable broadband service. And the truth, too, is that many state and local governments want that as well. They're working on behalf of their communities with industry partners to ensure that deployment is accelerated and that there are no unnecessary barriers to builds. In those states and localities, there's a recognition that faster, better broadband means more economic growth for their communities and provides opportunities for work, for education. However, there are some jurisdictions where providers continue to face lengthy delays, excessive fees, and unpredictable permitting processes that can postpone projects for months or even years. Those barriers raise costs of deployment or discourage it altogether, leaving consumers and communities stuck on the wrong side of the digital divide. In response, today's item asks whether the FCC should establish guardrails to ensure that state and local permitting processes are consistent with the Communications Act, Section 253, and do not effectively prohibit the provision of telecommunications services. We seek comment on setting a timeline for action on permits, on limiting fees to a reasonable approximation of the government's actual direct costs of managing the rights of ways, and on prohibiting the imposition of additional requirements on wireline builds that may also be used to provide other services in addition to the covered ones. At the same time, we've also built in questions to better understand how we can incentivize providers to act quickly on any granted authorization so that state and local governments have more certainty that deployments will be completed and that their resources as a government are being applied correctly. We do all of this consistent with past cases upholding the FCC's authority in this area. At the end of the day, we must ensure that permitting processes work efficiently and predictably for everyone so that communities across the country can benefit. Look forward to the record as it develops in this proceeding, and I want to thank in particular all of the staff that worked hard on this item, including Chief Calashone, Liz Drugula, Jesse Goodwin, Jody May, Rick Mallon, Milana Barzilai, Sarah Citron, Paul LaFontaine, Garnet Hanley, who's involved in all of these infrastructure efforts, and John Lockwood as well. So thanks to everyone for the work on the item. It has my support, and we'll now proceed to a vote on the item, starting with Commissioner Gomez.
Approve.
Commissioner Trustee?
Approve.
The chair votes to approve as well. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. And Madam Secretary, will you please announce the next item on today's agenda?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, item 2 on your agenda is titled Reviewing the E-Rate Program and Student Screen Time, and will be presented by the Wireline Competition Bureau, and Joseph Calashone, Bureau Chief, will give the introduction.
Chief, when you and your team are all set, please proceed.
I think we're back. The Wireline Competition Bureau is pleased to present for your consideration today a notice of proposed rulemaking and a further notice of proposed rulemaking that would seek comment on measures the Commission could take to empower parents, guardians, and teachers to ensure the E-rate program advances student learning outcomes and better protects children when using E-rate funded networks. It would also propose and seek comment on actions to strengthen E-rate program integrity and streamline program administration. I'd like to thank the Bureau team and our colleagues throughout the Commission for their hard work on this item. Seated at the table with me are Allison Baker, Associate Bureau Chief, Brian Boyle, Chief of the Bureau's Telecommunications Access Policy Division, and Matt Baker, Deputy Chief of the Division, who will now present the item.
Thank you, Joseph. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. If adopted, today's notice of proposed rulemaking would seek comment on ways the Commission could ensure E-rate funded networks are used responsibly and for educational purposes. As a part of the Commission's top-to-bottom review of USF programs, it would also seek comment on whether the E-rate program should be narrowed or reoriented to meet the policy goals Congress intended when it established the program, while remaining consistent with the requirements of Section 254 of the Act, and whether the Commission's current interpretation of the Children's Internet Protection Act is the best reading of that statute. Finally, the notice of proposed rulemaking would also seek comment on potential legal and policy considerations for assessing children's screen time and empowering parents, guardians, and teachers in decision-making involving children's access to E-rate funded networks and services. Today's further notice of proposed rulemaking, if adopted, would propose and seek comment on adopting recommendations from the FCC's Inspector General to strengthen E-rate program integrity and protect against fraud in the program, including by increasing oversight over consultants, by requiring new certifications, establishing a consultant database, and prohibiting percentage-based fee arrangements. It also proposes to streamline program administration. The Wireline Competition Bureau recommends adoption of this item and requests editorial privileges. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now hear comments from the bench, starting with Commissioner Gomez.
For nearly 30 years, the E-rate program has stood as one of our country's most successful and impactful educational and digital literacy initiatives. By connecting schools and libraries across the nation, we have narrowed the digital divide, ensured that students have access to the communication services necessary to learn essential digital skills, and prepared them to participate fully in our modern economy. As the United States competes globally to lead in artificial intelligence and advanced technologies, the importance of E-rate has never been greater. Yet today's item, which has been erroneously portrayed as an inquiry into screen time, ventures far beyond the Commission's area of expertise. Beneath the stated concern about screen time lies speculative and unwarranted proposals, including whether the Commission should terminate the E-rate program or dramatically limit its scope to only rural areas or areas served by a single provider. These proposals reflect a fundamental misunderstanding of the challenges schools and libraries face today and reveal a striking cognitive dissonance at the core of this item. Policymakers across the political spectrum, including leaders of this administration, have identified national leadership in artificial intelligence as an urgent priority. The Department of Education has affirmed that learning how to use AI is essential to ensuring Americans are competitive in a rapidly evolving workforce, and that students must be taught to use AI safely and effectively. Despite this, the proposals in today's item move in the opposite direction. We cannot elevate national expectations for digital and AI literacy while simultaneously stripping away the digital tools required to meet them. We cannot declare that AI leadership is a national priority while questioning whether schools should continue to receive the connectivity required to teach it. And we cannot champion innovation while pulling the ladder out from under the students who will build America's future technologies. This contradiction has a cost, and it will be paid by America's children. Ensuring connectivity in schools and libraries is not a one-time objective. It is a continuous, evolving responsibility. Educational technology advances rapidly. Bandwidth demands increase each year. New applications, including adaptive learning tools, online assessments, and AI-driven instruction, require robust, reliable networks. Schools and libraries also face recurring operational costs, including monthly service charges, internal network modernization, cybersecurity, and building and safety systems. Suggesting that recent broadband infrastructure investments justify narrowing or eliminating E-rate misunderstands the landscape. In the era of AI-enabled education, the question is not whether schools and libraries still need connectivity, it's whether we will support them in keeping pace with the demands of digital learning. The era of learning by quill and candlelight is long over. Gutting E-rate would turn back the clock on American classrooms and leave our students behind peers in every developed and developing nation now investing in digital learning. Parents, educators, librarians, pediatricians, and state and local leaders are appropriately engaged in addressing concerns about children's mental health, online safety, and healthy technology use. These issues are complex and require careful, ongoing research and collaboration. No one is arguing that concerns over screen time are imaginary. The research on children's development, attention spans, and mental health is real and worth taking seriously. But those conversations belong in homes, classrooms, pediatricians' offices, and with state, local, and federal legislators. Policing children's behavior in schools goes far beyond our stated mandate. The FCC is not the nation's parent, it is not the nation's teacher, it is not the nation's school board. The Communications Act charges the FCC with ensuring access to communication services to schools and libraries, not with second-guessing how teachers use technology in their classrooms. The relationship between technology and learning is nuanced, frequently studied, and best evaluated by educators, families, health experts, and local communities. The Commission lacks both the statutory mandate and the requisite expertise to regulate such decisions. Educational uses of technology should not be conflated with social media or entertainment. Digital tools are now essential to learning, collaboration, skill building, and preparation for participation in a technology-driven workforce. This item continues a troubling trend of narrowing programs that support the communities with the fewest resources. The children most harmed by any weakening of E-rate are not those with multiple devices and high-speed broadband at home. They are the children who rely on schools and libraries for digital access, the students for whom E-rate is a lifeline to opportunity. E-rate is the largest federal funding program for libraries and the third largest for education. 95% of surveyed schools and libraries consider E-rate funding essential to meeting their connectivity needs. Weakening this program would deepen educational inequities and move us further away from digital equity, not closer to it. Congress established E-rate to ensure communications access for schools and libraries in rural, urban, high-cost, and low-income areas. Congress did not ask the FCC to revisit or narrow the program's scope, nor did Congress intend for federal connectivity support to hinge on anyone's preferred educational philosophies or screen time preferences. This NPRM seeks to reverse 30 years of settled law. Proposals to restrict E-rate to only rural areas or areas with a single provider contradict clear statutory intent and ignore the realities of modern education. Digital literacy, AI literacy, broadband access, and equitable technology use are now fundamental to economic participation, civic engagement, and national competitiveness. Other countries are not debating whether their students should have access to digital tools. They are expanding those investments. We cannot expect America to compete globally if we abandon the programs that make digital opportunity possible for every student. Weakening E-rate contradicts national priorities, undermines educational equity, and jeopardizes America's long-term competitiveness. This program should be strengthened, not hollowed out, so that every student in every community has the connectivity and digital skills needed to succeed in a world that will not wait for us to catch up. I want to thank the chairman and his staff for working with my office on changes to this item, as well as the Wireline Competition Bureau staff for their hard work on this item. I will dissent in part and approve in part.
Thank you, Commissioner. We'll now hear comments from Commissioner Trusty.
Thank you. As we celebrate the upcoming 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, I'm reminded that one of our founding fathers, Benjamin Franklin, played a role in two other notable American firsts that are relevant to today's item. Early in his academic career, Franklin attended Boston Latin School, widely regarded as the first public school in what would become the United States. His commitment to learning stayed with him throughout his life. When a small Massachusetts town renamed itself Franklin, in hopes of receiving a donation from its favorite namesake, Franklin sent them books. Those books became the foundation of what is often recognized as America's first free public lending library. Schools and libraries have long been pillars of education and opportunity in this country. Since the enactment of the Telecommunications Act of 1996, the E-rate program has helped support that mission. Some analyses indicate that 96% of public schools nationwide receive E-rate support. Libraries likewise remain vital community institutions, counting more than 800 million visits in 2023 and providing access to digital learning tools, online resources, creative studios, and research databases. Access to digital learning tools in schools and libraries can be beneficial to children when used in moderation. They can support academic training, teach responsible online behavior, and prepare the nation's youth for eventual employment. Schools and libraries can also play an important role in preparing children for a future in which AI literacy will be a necessary skill for full participation in the digital economy. Notwithstanding the virtues of digital learning tools, the health and well-being of America's children should come first and guide the extent to which they engage with certain technologies. This administration has recognized that as a priority. Initiatives like First Lady Melania Trump's Fostering the Future Together Global Coalition will help young people develop essential digital skills, including AI literacy, in safe learning environments that protect them from online dangers. These safe learning environments can include a reduction in prolonged screen exposure as well. Importantly, we cannot ignore growing concerns about the effects of excessive screen time. The Surgeon General has warned that excessive screen use is associated with negative educational, developmental, and health outcomes for school-age children. State and local leaders have taken note, with many jurisdictions adopting policies that limit technology during the school day in an effort to improve student welfare and academic performance. Keeping these issues in mind, along with changing technology and marketplace dynamics, the Commission has a responsibility to periodically review the E-rate program to ensure it faithfully implements our statutory directives. In the record, I encourage E-rate advocates to thoroughly explain how the program can focus on the most pressing connectivity needs of schools and libraries while taking into account state and local policy developments spurred by emerging research on effective learning environments. Finally, I appreciate that this item highlights many specific issues the Commission will need to confront as this proceeding moves ahead to remain grounded in universal service principles established by Congress. I thank the staff of the Wireline Competition Bureau for their great work on this item.
Thank you, Commissioners. Over the last decade, school districts all across the country experimented with a massive increase in screen time for students. In many classrooms, turning pages in books, penciling out answers to math problems, and asking teachers questions were replaced for long stretches of time by kids swiping on tablets. Indeed, the data show that more than half of students now use a computer for up to 4 hours a day, and a quarter of them spend more than 4 hours on screens. Kids as young as 8 have been spending up to 5.5 hours daily on screens. By grade 8, more than 50% of kids report using computers in all or almost all classes, up from just 30% a couple years ago. In many cases, school districts were not freelancing in this effort. There had been a strong push at the state, local, and federal level by policymakers to increase screen time. Many argued that increasing screens in schools was an unalloyed good. The more, the better. Many tech companies, for their part, supported the surge in screen time, benefiting from increased device sales. In any setting, but particularly in educational ones, it's important to look at the data. The results from America's experiment with pervasive screen time in school are now starting to pour in. The data show that reading and math skills have declined substantially. They show that increased screen times have been associated with lower reading and math achievement on standardized tests in elementary school. Achievement gaps, as the chart here shows, have also widened between students in the 90th and 10th percentiles. One researcher has described these downward trend lines as representing one of the largest declines in human capital we've ever observed. We're not the only ones concerned about screen time and poor educational outcomes. Researchers are consistently finding that excessive screen time use has a detrimental impact on the well-being of kids and teens. Professor Jonathan Haidt, social psychologist and professor at NYU's Stern School of Business, has found that screen time is linked with the rise of youth depression and anxiety. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, as well as the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, have both found that too much screen time may lead to lower grades in school and reading fewer books, among other negative outcomes. These trends have grabbed the attention of federal policymakers. A number of bills have been introduced in Congress that are aimed at reducing kids' screen time. For example, in 2023, Senator Ted Cruz, Ted Budd, and Shelley Moore Capito proposed the Eyes on the Board Act to require schools and school districts that participate in the FCC's E-rate program to block social media access on subsidized services and networks and to adopt policies to limit screen time in school. Other agencies are also taking a close look at this issue, including NTIA, where Administrator Roth launched an initiative to examine the role of educational technology and screen use in K-12 schools, beginning with a listening session focused on kids' excessive screen use in schools. School districts are taking action too. As of last month, at least 6 states have imposed bans or limits on screen time, and more than a dozen other states have introduced bills that would result in bans or limits. Just this week, the Los Angeles Unified School District adopted new rules that prohibit screen time for kids before 2nd grade, cap it at 60 minutes for kids between 2nd and 5th grade, and allow middle schoolers and high schoolers a total of 6 hours and 10 hours a week, respectively. The San Diego Unified School District Board also adopted rules limiting screen time just this week, including removing computers from transitional kindergarten classrooms and banning YouTube. Against this backdrop, I think it's appropriate for the FCC to also look at its own programs. As relevant here, the FCC has a roughly $3 billion a year program called E-rate. The program has been in place since 1997, and it's played an important role in expanding connectivity to schools and libraries. It began with a very clear focus: support basic internet access to schools and libraries for educational purposes. Kids could experience digital opportunity for the first time in computer labs, at school, or at the library. Since then, however, the E-rate program has expanded exponentially, supporting a much broader list of services. The number of devices connecting to those E-rate supported networks has continued to grow as well. Gone are the days when schools focused predominantly on connecting computer labs. Instead, nearly 100% of public schools report that they provide devices to the students covered in that report, up from only 23%, again, just a couple years ago. And this is in addition to the many computers and phones that students are bringing to school from home. So in today's item, we're asking the important common sense questions that will allow us to ensure that the program that we administer continues to support educational opportunity, while also considering whether additional safeguards, refinements, or updates are needed to better protect kids online and ensure great educational outcomes. We seek comment on whether the program should be reoriented in light of all of the developments and studies that we've talked about, as well as the increase in connectivity to schools and libraries across the country since E-Rate's founding in 1997. We also explore whether our current interpretation of the Child's Internet Protection Act is the best reading of the statute, or whether there's more that the FCC or schools across the country could do to protect kids online when they're using E-Rate supported networks. Finally, we're proposing steps to strengthen integrity of the E-Rate program itself, including increasing oversight over consultants to help safeguard the program against waste, fraud, and abuse. Many people have weighed in support of launching this rulemaking. We've heard from obviously lots of individuals, the National Center on Child Exploitation, the Internet Accountability Project, Independent Women's Forum, and many other groups as well. So I welcome the discussion that this item will generate. I look forward to reviewing the record as it develops, and I want to thank again the FCC's expert team for all of their great work on the item. In particular, thanks to Allison Baker, Brian Boyle, Matt Baker, Kristen Birkeland, Rachel Bixby, Chief Calashone, Kate DeMichelle, Gabby Gross, Molly O'Connor, Johnny Schreiber, Veronica Garcia Ulloa, Jonathan Lecter, and Milena Barzilai for all of their great work. We will now turn to a vote on the item, starting with Commissioner Gomez.
Dissent in part and approve in part.
Commissioner Trustee.
Approve.
The chair votes to approve as well. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. And Madam Secretary, will you please announce the next item on today's agenda?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, item 3 on your agenda is titled Improving Next Generation 911 Reliability and Interoperability, and will be presented by the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau. Zenji Nakasawa, Bureau Chief, will give the introduction.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Today, we're pleased to present you with a second report and order and second further notice of rulemaking that modernizes the Commission's 911 reliability framework for IP-based next-generation 911 networks, while also supporting NG 911 interoperability and eliminating unnecessary regulatory burdens on service providers. I want to thank the dedicated Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau staff who worked on this item, as well as the other bureaus and offices that contributed. With me today are David Firth, Deputy Bureau Chief, Rachel Waxman, Deputy Division Chief for the Policy and Licensing Division, and Daniel Spurlock, an Attorney Advisor in the division who will now present the item. Daniel.
Thank you, Chief Nakazawa, and good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Today's order modernizes the Commission's 911 reliability framework in order to strengthen the resiliency of NG 911 networks. It also promotes NG 911 network interoperability between states while significantly reducing regulatory burdens on service providers. The order accomplishes this by updating the Commission's 911 reliability rules, which were originally adopted in 2013, which, in order to keep pace with evolving technology and address associated outage risks. The new 911 reliability framework applies to service providers that control or operate critical pathways and components in NG 911 networks and systems, in addition to the providers of critical 911 functions and connectivity in legacy and transitional networks. The new framework enables covered providers to leverage the strengths and flexibility of modern IP networks by incorporating reliability best practices recommended by the Commission's Communications, Security, Reliability, and Interoperability Council. To promote interoperability, the order adopts a definition of interoperability specific to NG 911 and requires NG 911 network providers to report on their progress towards supporting the seamless transfer of 911 calls across state borders. To eliminate unnecessary compliance burdens, the order ends the current requirement for service providers to file 911 reliability certifications on an annual basis. Providers will instead file a one-time streamlined certification with the Commission to be updated only as needed in the event of material changes. Finally, the order empowers state and local governments to obtain reliability information directly from service providers, but subject to appropriate confidentiality protections, in order to improve state and local oversight during the NG911 transition. The further notice that accompanies the order proposes to require interstate testing of live 911 call transfers in order to further strengthen NG911 interoperability. It also seeks information on improving accessibility in NG911 systems through direct video calling. The Bureau recommends adoption of the item and seeks editorial privileges. Thank you.
Thanks for the presentation. We'll now hear comments from the bench, starting with Commissioner Gomez.
Every second counts when someone calls 911. Today's item addresses a gap that has existed for years. As the country modernized its 911 system from old telephone-based networks to internet-based technology, a whole new set of companies became essential to keeping 911 operational, and most of them had no reliability obligations under our rules. Major multi-state outages have happened in exactly these unregulated parts of the network. This order finally closes that gap by bringing those companies under the Commission's reliability framework for the first time, updating our standards to reflect how modern networks actually work, and requiring companies to report on their interoperability efforts as a foundation for the stronger mandates proposed in the accompanying further notice. I'm particularly encouraged by the further notice's proposals on direct video calling for people who are deaf, hard of hearing, or have speech disabilities. This technology is already saving lives on the 988 crisis line, and I look forward to seeing us make that same progress for 911. I want to thank the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau for their work on this item, and I'm pleased to support it.
Thank you, Commissioner. We now hear comments from Commissioner Trusty.
Thank you. A few months ago, I visited the Washington, D.C. Emergency Operations Center, where I saw how calls and texts are received from across the district and how emergency responders are dispatched in our unique urban environment. Observing the critical work performed there reinforced the importance of the FCC's public safety mission, ensuring that when Americans reach out for help, their 911 call connects to a public safety answering point and emergency assistance can be mobilized without delay. Under this administration, the Commission has been focused on modernizing communications networks and strengthening the tools Americans rely upon to access emergency services. Foremost among those tools is the ability to call 911 and connect with a trained emergency telecommunicator. As that work continues, states across the country have made significant progress in transitioning to next generation 911, creating a more resilient emergency communications ecosystem that's better equipped to withstand outages, including those caused by intentional acts of network vandalism. The benefits of next generation 911 are significant, including enhanced resilience and interoperability, as well as enabling the transmission of texts, photos, and videos, and other data that can help emergency personnel respond to those in need more effectively. But as the nation continues its transition to all IP networks, the Commission has a responsibility to ensure that access to 911 remains reliable and consistent throughout this migration. Technological advancements should strengthen emergency communications, not introduce new vulnerabilities or leave Americans without access to life-saving services when they need them most. The measures adopted in this item strike that balance by updating the definition of covered 911 service providers to include operators of key NG911 network facilities and components, while also streamlining the reliability certification process. The Commission is improving accountability and oversight in addition to reducing unnecessary regulatory burdens. I also appreciate the inclusion of language to ensure the certification process yields assurances that providers are complying with the reliability rules without requiring excess or unnecessary updates. Emergency calls are too important to leave to chance. As modern technology continues to expand and improves the nation's ability to transport 911 calls, it's essential that our reliability framework keeps pace. I thank the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau for their great work on this item.
Thank you, Commissioners. Calls to 911 should always go through. During times of crisis, Americans don't think about the complex web of networks and providers and regulations that make it all possible, but the FCC's public safety team certainly does. Our focus is on making sure that we have resilient, redundant, and interoperable communications networks. As we've heard from the dais already, there has been recent service disruptions that are likely part of the ongoing transition to NG 911, and it's important that we take a look to make sure that there are no unnecessary gaps in our regulatory structure. We've worked hard to strike the right balance in this particular item, and I want to thank Commissioner Trusty in particular for her work, for her thoughtful edits that I think help us land this item in a workable spot to make sure that we have the best outcomes for 911 callers, for providers, and for regulations that are going to work in the real world. So thank you, Commissioner, for your helpful changes to the item. We also explore additional interoperability requirements for NG 911 in this particular item, as well as ways we can facilitate greater use of video technologies for 911 to improve accessibility for public safety. So thanks again to the FCC's great public safety team, Chief Nakazawa, David Firth, John Evanoff, Rachel Waxman, Chris Fideli, Dan Spurlock, Roberto Mussenden, Rasul Safavian, Susie Rosen Singleton, and Bill Wallace for all of the great work on the item. It has my support. And with that, we'll proceed to a vote on the item, starting with Commissioner Gomez.
Approve.
Commissioner Trusty?
Approve.
The chair votes to approve as well. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. Madam Secretary, will you please announce the next item on today's agenda?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, item 4 on your agenda is titled Modernizing of the Nation's Alerting Systems and will be presented by the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau. Zenji Nakazawa, Bureau Chief, will give the introduction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. The Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau is also pleased to present for your consideration a report and order and further notice of proposed rulemaking that would take steps to secure and modernize the nation's alert and warning systems. I would like to thank the Bureau and office staff who worked on this item. Tara Shostek, an attorney advisor in the Cybersecurity and Communications Reliability Division, is now seated at the table and will present the report and order and further notice of proposed rulemaking. Tara?
Thank you, Chief Nakazawa. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Last year, the Commission opened an examination of the nation's alerting systems to explore ways to make them more effective, efficient, and better able to serve the public's needs. As part of that effort, this order aims to promote public trust in EAS by requiring targeted cybersecurity improvements that will help protect against the hijacking of EAS by cyber criminals and our nation's adversaries. EAS participants would be required to secure equipment that supports their programming stream by changing default passwords and using strong passwords, promptly testing and installing security patches issued by equipment manufacturers, and using a firewall or comparable network segmentation practice to limit remote access to authorized devices and users. The accompanying further notice would improve EAS's integrity and reliability by proposing to require the authentication of all alerts before they're transmitted. It would also propose to improve detection and blocking of duplicate alerts through the use of universal alert identification numbers. The further notice would also seek to improve the geographic accuracy of alerts by proposing to eliminate outdated WIA geotargeting exceptions and expand EAS geotargeting options by allowing geotargeting via polygons like those used in WIA. It would also seek to ensure that WIAs are consistently sent to members of the public who enter an alerts delivery area for the first time until the emergency ends. The further notice would seek comment on whether to make EAS and WIA more effective, independent of language, by requiring the display of a symbol that matches the type of emergency that is the subject of the alert. It would also seek comment on whether to improve the ability of earthquake alerts to grab the public's attention through a text-to-speech announcement or a unique attention signal. Finally, the further notice would remove unnecessary regulatory burdens by proposing to allow EAS participants to deploy software-based EAS solutions instead of requiring dedicated equipment, and would propose to retire the 90-character maximum versions of WIA messages, which alerting authorities have indicated are too short to provide actionable information. The Bureau recommends adoption of this report and order and further notice of proposed rulemaking and requests editorial privileges for technical and conforming edits. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. We'll now hear comments from the bench, starting with Commissioner Gomez.
Emergency alerts save lives, and today's item takes meaningful steps to make sure that they keep doing so. The order closes real documented security gaps that bad actors have exploited for years to hijack broadcast equipment and insert false content into the airwaves. Despite repeated FCC warnings going back to 2020, those attacks have continued. So I'm glad that at least in this instance, we are walking away from unrealistic voluntary commitments and are instead making basic cybersecurity hygiene mandatory. The accompanying further notice opens an important conversation about the next generation of improvements to both EAS and WIA, from both accurate geo-targeting to better duplicate alert suppression to modernized message formats. I want to highlight one proposal that deserves particular attention as we build the record. The Commission is seeking comment on requiring text-to-speech functionality for earthquake alerts in English, Spanish, and other languages. I want to thank the Chair for working with my office to ensure this question is in the item. An alert that arrives in a language someone cannot read is not helpful, and in a situation where seconds matter, hearing clear spoken instructions in your own language could be the difference between safety and serious harm. The United States is hosting multiple major international events in the coming years, bringing millions of visitors from around the world to communities across the country. Our emergency alert systems need to be ready to reach all of them, and I will be watching closely as this record develops. I want to thank the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau for their work on this item, and I am pleased to support it.
Thank you, Commissioner. We'll now hear comments from Commissioner Trusty.
Thank you. In May, I had the opportunity to visit the Nebraska Emergency Management Agency at a time when Nebraska is experiencing the worst wildfire season it has seen in its history. Since February, more than 800,000 acres have burned, causing widespread destruction and millions of dollars in damage. Throughout these emergencies, NEMA has coordinated and initiated alerts that are then transmitted by broadcasters, cable operators, and other communications providers to people throughout the state. This essential process is repeated every day across the country whenever disaster strikes. Whether the threat is a wildfire, tornado, hurricane, or other emergency, Americans rely on our alerting systems to deliver timely and accurate information when it matters most. Any vulnerability in the emergency alert system can have serious consequences, and that's why it has been appropriate for the Commission to conduct a comprehensive review of the EAS framework by focusing on the security of the system itself. As cybersecurity threats continue to evolve, EAS participants must take appropriate steps to safeguard the infrastructure that supports the delivery of life-saving alerts. Today's report and order advances that goal by strengthening cybersecurity practices and helping secure this critical component of our nation's emergency communications infrastructure. The further notice charts a path toward modernizing the broader alerting framework by leveraging new technologies, streamlining outdated requirements, and improving the usability and effectiveness of the EAS system. Protecting the nation's communications networks from malicious actors is among the Commission's most important responsibilities, and today's actions will help ensure emergency alerts remain secure, reliable, and effective in keeping Americans out of harm's way and saving lives. I thank the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau for their work on this item.
Thank you, Commissioners. A couple years ago, some folks may remember, or at least those that follow the intricacies of interesting EAS events will know that an alert went out warning all Americans that zombies were rising up from the dead and launching an attack. Thankfully, in some ways, it was not a true alert. Unfortunately, it was the effect of a cyber attack where bad actors were attempting to get into broadcast stations' EAS equipment and help to underscore the need for the FCC to stay vigilant with our approach when it comes to EAS technologies. Today's item picks up on our long-standing efforts to make sure that we have basic common sense cybersecurity and other measures in place. We look at a number of other reforms and improvements to ensure the integrity, resilience, and effectiveness of our emergency alerting system. So for all their great work on the item, I want to thank the team, in particular Logan Bennett, Stephen Carpenter, George Donato, Leon Kenworthy, David Kirchner, Zoe Lee, David Munson, Chief Nakazawa, Austin Randazzo, Tara Shostek, and James Wiley for everything that they did on this. It has my support. With that, we'll turn to votes, starting with Commissioner Gomez.
Approve.
Commissioner Trusty?
Approve.
The chair votes to approve as well. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. And Madam Secretary, will you please announce the next, and I believe last item on today's agenda? So hang in there, folks. It is one of my favorites. It is accelerating the build-out of undersea cables. It's a bit of an inside joke, but
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, item 5 on your agenda is titled Accelerating the Buildout of Submarine Cables and will be presented by the Office of International Affairs, and Thomas Sullivan, Office Chief, will give the introduction.
Chief, when you're ready, please proceed.
Thank you, and good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. The Office of International Affairs is pleased to present a second report in order and second further notice of proposed rulemaking that, if adopted, would further advance the swift and responsible deployment of our nation's submarine cable infrastructure while fortifying the security upon which our communication systems depend. I would like to thank the staff from the Office of International Affairs and from the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau for their assistance with this item. With me today at the table from the Office of International Affairs are Haley Steffen, Assistant Chief, Brenda Villanueva, Deputy Division Chief of the Telecommunications and Analysis Division, Desiree Hansen and Gabrielle Kim, Attorney Advisors in the division. Gabrielle will present the item.
Thank you, Tom. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. The Office of International Affairs is pleased to present the second report in order and second further notice of proposed rulemaking, which builds on the rules adopted in the 2025 submarine cable first report in order to facilitate faster and more efficient deployment of submarine cables, while also strengthening our national security. The second report in order would adopt an approach to expedite submarine cable deployment by presumptively exempting applications that meet certain national security standards from Commission referral to the executive branch agencies. This approach would provide applicants with greater regulatory certainty, shorten processing timelines, and strengthen national security oversight of this critical infrastructure. The second report in order would also establish a regulatory regime for licensing owners and/or operators of submarine line terminal equipment known as SLTE, including granting a blanket license to any current and future SLTE owners and/or operators that are not currently a licensee and are not otherwise subject to certain exceptions. These SLTE owners and/or operators would then be required to adhere to certain routine conditions and reporting requirements. Finally, the second report in order would build on our previous security efforts and adopt additional national security-related routine conditions and certification requirements for cable landing licensees. The second further notice would seek comment on routine conditions the Commission should consider to improve oversight of cable landing licensees, including SLTE owners and operators. We recommend adoption of the second report in order and second further notice and request editorial privileges for technical and conforming edits. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. We will now hear comments from the bench, starting with Commissioner Gomez.
Now, Tom knows I have a special place in my heart for what I will call international. But I am particularly delighted to see Haley sitting at the table. Haley's my former legal advisor and now doing great work with you guys. So just so happy to see this. This report in order is a significant step forward in safeguarding the backbone of our global communications. The submarine cables that carry over 99% of intercontinental internet traffic and support more than $10 trillion in daily financial transactions. These cables are not just technical marvels. They are essential infrastructure for economic leadership, national security, and the continued growth of technologies like AI and cloud computing. As the volume and sensitivity of the traffic traversing these cables increases, so does the imperative to ensure their security and their reliability. With this order, the Commission strengthens regulatory oversight and adopts enhanced security standards for submarine cable operators and owners. The new framework integrates robust cybersecurity and physical security requirements while leveraging trusted approaches such as relying on the NIST cybersecurity framework. These measures are designed to mitigate threats ranging from unauthorized access to data interception to physical disruptions, while balancing these protections with streamlined processes and reporting requirements. This proceeding further underscores the importance of international cooperation and continued leadership by the United States and its allies in using secure, trusted technologies. By coordinating closely with our federal partners, we ensure that the critical infrastructure supporting our global economy remains resilient and protected against evolving national security risks. I want to thank the chairman and his staff for working with my office on changes to the item, as well as the Office of International Affairs staff for their good work on the item.
Thank you, Commissioner. We'll now hear from Commissioner Trusty.
Thank you. The United States connects to the world through more than 90 submarine cable systems. These cables form a critical part of our communications infrastructure, carrying the vast majority of international internet traffic and supporting everything from communications and banking to cloud computing, media distribution, artificial intelligence, and more. Any disruption or sabotage affecting these systems could have significant consequences for our economic and national security, as well as U.S. technological leadership. In my international engagements over the past year, submarine cables have been frequently cited as both major areas of investment and an emerging point of strategic vulnerability. And so I welcome today's report and order for proactively recognizing that the security and resilience of our submarine cable ecosystem extend to the terrestrial facilities and equipment that connect these systems to our communications networks. By establishing a framework that addresses submarine line terminal equipment and related security considerations, we are taking a measured step toward ensuring that our regulatory approach reflects today's technological environment and threat landscape. In addition to strengthening national security, this item appropriately streamlines the cable licensing process, improving regulatory efficiency for applicants. Security and deployment are not competing objectives. Indeed, the United States benefits economically and strategically when we can facilitate the rapid construction of trusted infrastructure while ensuring that appropriate safeguards are in place against evolving threats. The streamlined review mechanisms adopted here can help provide greater certainty to applicants, encourage investment, and reduce unnecessary delays, all while preserving rigorous review where circumstances warrant it. Looking ahead, I welcome the further notice, and I look forward to reviewing additional input from stakeholders on whether routine conditions can further mitigate national security risks and improve oversight of SLTEs. Throughout this proceeding, we should remain attentive to both the costs and benefits of any new requirements and ensure that our rules promote innovation, competition, and resilience. I thank the Office of International Affairs for their excellent work on this item.
Thank you, Commissioners. The FCC's Build America agenda has been focused on accelerating the build-out of secure, next-gen infrastructure. And for the most part, Americans can see that infrastructure as they go about their daily lives. You can see cell towers, you can see fiber hanging from utility poles, you can even see low Earth orbit satellites if you know what you're looking for. But we rely heavily on a network of undersea cables that most of us never even think about. Undersea cables are the unsung hero of the global internet, as we've heard, carrying up to 99% of global internet traffic. And it's American providers that are leading the world in this segment of the market. American companies dominate the laying, owning, and operating of these cables, as well as the provisioning of the equipment that makes it all run. But there's even more that we can do to supercharge this industry. Accelerating submarine cable construction will mean faster, more resilient internet services for Americans, especially as AI fuels even greater connectivity demands. It also means that we will be able to continue to sell services globally. At the same time, submarine cables face greater threats than ever. Bad actors seek access to sensitive data and communications that run on these cables, and threats from cyber or physical disruption only continue to grow. The rules we adopt today strike a right balance. We presumptively exempt cable applications from extensive and time-consuming reviews, but only if those applicants can certify to stringent security standards and agree to ongoing oversight and monitoring. The message is simple: adopt strong national security standards and get a glide path to application approval. One other security point of note: for the first time, we're directly licensing owners and operators of what we call submarine line terminal equipment. This is essential equipment located at the endpoints of submarine cables that connect the undersea portion with terrestrial networks. It's also probably one of the most vulnerable parts of the cable system. So our rules today will enhance oversight of that equipment by the FCC and our national security and law enforcement partners. So for all their great work on the item, I want to thank the team: Chief Sullivan, Denise Coca, Desiree Hansen, Gabriel Kim, Haley Steffen, Svant Swider, Brenda Villanueva, Justin Kane, Ken Carlberg, Rebecca Clinton, get this pop-up out of the way, Greg Haligian, Leon Kenworthy, and Alex Yankelevich. Thanks for all of your work. We will now proceed to a vote on the item, starting with Commissioner Gomez.
Approve.
Commissioner Trustee?
Approve.
The chair votes to approve as well. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. At this time, would any of my colleagues like to make any announcements, starting with Commissioner Gomez?
Thank you. I am delighted to introduce you to my summer 2026 intern. You do have to stand up. Yep. Nia Grundy is a rising 2L at Howard University School of Law. She is from Union, New Jersey, and graduated from Howard University with her BA in philosophy with a minor in strategic, legal, and management communications. She became interested in the FCC through the FCBA's Technology, Media, and Telecommunications Pipeline Program. Before law school, Nia worked as a kindergarten teacher, so she fits in great, at a state STEM education nonprofit, thank you, and has an English bulldog named Sumo. Welcome.
Okay, I'd like to welcome our second summer intern in the trustee office, Sam Dodson. Thank you for standing up so everyone can say hi. So Sam is a rising second-year law student at the University of Colorado. He has an undergraduate degree in aerospace engineering from the U.S. Naval Academy and a master's degree in finance from Johns Hopkins. Before law school, Sam served as an active duty officer in the Navy and later worked as a space systems engineer. In his free time, Sam enjoys exploring the city, listening to podcasts, searching for good iced tea, and playing tennis. So please join me in welcoming Sam to the FCC.
Good. Thanks. Well, first of all, I do want to welcome some special guests at the FCC meeting today. The chairman of the Communications Regulatory Commission of Mongolia, Chairman Jalavi Su-run. Please, good to see you. The chairman and I had a very productive meeting yesterday. We signed a memorandum of understanding where we are strengthening the bilateral cooperation between our two agencies and our two countries, promoting the development of competitive markets, technological innovation, and secure networks for increased connectivity for the benefit of both of our countries. And just want to thank him for his friendship, and we are going to learn a lot at the FCC from their experience, and I look forward to the partnership with them. Next, I want to turn to our summer interns at the FCC, at least in the chair's office, and introduce our law clerks, Ellie Lichtenstein and Patrick Hart. Ellie and Patrick, if you guys could stand up, thank you. Ellie completed his undergrad at Brandeis and is a rising second-year law student at George Washington Law School, where he's on the law review. In our office this summer, he's already been hard at work doing legal research, writing memos, and other productive efforts for us. In his free time, he enjoys traveling, stargazing with binoculars and flying, which is relevant because next up, he is going to be interning after this at NASA Goddard in the fall. So thanks for joining us, Ellie. Appreciate it. And Patrick completed his undergrad at the College of William & Mary and is a rising second year at my law school, Catholic University. As an intern, he's already hit the ground running, doing legal research, preparing briefing materials for us, and generally finding ways to move the ball forward in our office. In his free time, Patrick loves playing chess and rugby, two activities that naturally pair well together. And he's also looking forward to getting started with law review this fall. So thank you to the both of you for joining us, and we look forward to all of your contributions over this summer. So thanks. Madam Secretary, will you please announce the next date of the Commission's monthly agenda meeting?
The next agenda meeting of the Federal Communications Commission is Wednesday, July 22nd, 2026.
Thanks. Until then, we stand adjourned.
Hello, everybody. Wow, that was loud. Thought I had to come in hot and already was. So if we could just take our conversations outside, we'll be starting the chairman's press conference momentarily. We have a full group of reporters here, so I'm just going to remind you all when it is your turn to ask a question to please state your name and outlet, as well as hit the button to turn the light on red so we can hear you. And as always, we will start at the end on my left and work our way down. So just a friendly reminder on that as well. So with that, I will hand that over to Chairman Carr. Thank you so much.
Okay, good to see everybody again this month. We had another great, productive open meeting. Obviously, we had one of our key items was on taking a fresh look at the FCC's E-rate program and potentially aligning it with some of the research and data that we're seeing for a long time. I think there was sort of a dominant view that more screens is better and can only lead to great educational outcomes. And the results that are pouring in, as some of the charts showed on the board today, is very different than that. So we want to do our part to take a look at our program in light of that research, and that's what we're doing. Also this week, good news at the FCC, we closed our AWS-3 spectrum auction, which was probably the first spectrum auction that we've had in probably 4 years. So it's great for the FCC to exercise that muscle, have a successful auction. It exceeded expectations. I know some people are now writing that it was about where expectations were, but I saw what you guys wrote a couple weeks ago, and you weren't saying $3.5 billion. So I'm glad to see that we raised over $3.5 billion. I got to spend some time with the FCC staff in our auctions war room that we're monitoring that, and thank them for all of their hard work there. And hopefully we'll have more auctions to come in the not too distant future. But that's a great win because it's also going to be, more spectrum means more capacity that drives down prices. That's more competition for consumers. So it's a really, really good thing. Also, since the last press conference, I had the chance to get out of D.C., 2 separate visits to Michigan, to Ohio, working on our drone dominance efforts, meeting with providers of drone and counter-drone technologies, meeting with broadband builders, tower climbers. I had the chance to go to Tough Tower, which is sort of like a tower climbing Olympics, which was a lot of fun to get to do. I always love spending time with some of America's hardworking tower crews. Finally, another thanks of appreciation to the FCC staff that has been deployed across the country in support of the FIFA World Cup efforts. They're doing a lot just to monitor the RF environment, to make sure that we continue to have reliable public safety communications, and so our engineering experts are out there and are reporting all successes at this point, and we'll keep monitoring that effort. And with that, happy to open it up, take questions.
Hi, Sarah Friedman, Inside Cybersecurity. I wanted to ask, following up on the emergency alert system rulemaking, if you have any plans to establish any new requirements for broadcasters following your workshop in May, and if you can provide any information on what's next for the U.S. Cyber Trust Mark.
Right. Well, U.S. Cyber Trust Mark, again, we sort of did a little bit of a reset there as we transitioned into this administration. The administrator that had been selected or tentatively selected decided to withdraw from the process. There have been some concerns raised about some of their operations potentially in China. And so we are now moving forward, obviously, with a different administrator. And we think that program is going to have a really good future. No new news to break on that. On this EAS front, we're continuing to work ahead. I mean, obviously, historically, EAS was governed by expensive, bespoke pieces of equipment, and it was therefore costly. And we're open, among other things, to how do we sort of move into a more software-based environment, which could potentially drive down costs for broadcasters. But we'll look at whatever people file on any of the issues that we've teed up in that proceeding. Thanks.
Thank you, Chairman Carr. Ariel Hickson, MS Now. As I'm sure you're aware, ABC has launched a campaign against the FCC, airing television spots directing viewers to submit public comments on the FCC's website. And since then, since there's been some reports that the FCC has received over 16,000 comments from the public. First question there, have you received an increase in comments regarding the review of The View? And what is your response to that, especially as the general public appears to be expressing concern on various platforms?
Well, look, we've run a lot of proceedings at the FCC, and 99% of the time it doesn't break above the noise floor in terms of media issues. Occasionally it does. I've had the benefit of living through the great net neutrality wars, actually multiple net neutrality wars, and when you see an issue at the FCC that breaks above the noise floor, you get an increase in comments, and that's very natural. I mean, look, Disney, from my perspective, is running a fairly standard, off-the-shelf PR strategy, and I guess they want to fight this out in the press. I saw, I guess it was Tuesday or whatever, they must have sent out, their standard talkers and stories, and every single story, I think some of you, many others, popped at exactly 11 a.m. since they have an embargo to that. But look, everything that we've seen so far is really no surprises. It's a fairly standard, off-the-shelf strategy. But for our part, we're full steam ahead. We're going to follow the facts and the law wherever they take us. And again, with Disney, we have 3 issues going on right now. One, we've had a long-running DEI investigation at Disney that goes back all the way to March of 2025. There had been evidence presented to the FCC that fell into a number of buckets, including evidence that went to discrimination along protected characteristics with respect potentially to hiring, to compensation, to promotions, to workplace opportunities. Disney has their view. They're putting evidence in. They've put evidence in, and we haven't made a final adjudication on that, but that proceeding is focused on the concerns that have been raised there. In light of where we were in that investigation, and in particular, the fact that Disney's production to the FCC in terms of our subpoenas to them were deficient, that staff letters informed them were disingenuous responses, we felt we needed to take that next step of calling their licenses in for early renewal. So we have that early renewal proceeding going at the FCC right now, where Disney is making the case that the FCC should renew their licenses. They're arguing that they've operated in the public interest over the license term. And again, we're in the middle of the pleading cycle on that. We'll see where that goes. And we also obviously have an equal time proceeding as well, where they have filed, Disney, a petition for declaratory ruling to have us declare that The View is a bona fide news program. And again, we're just going to run normal process and all that, and we'll go wherever the facts and the law take us. So.
In an article from the Washington Post, you said that that they've chosen to run a campaign of, quote, misinformation. Do you still stand by that comment?
I didn't say that.
Okay.
I do think that Disney is running a campaign of misinformation here. I think in a lot of ways, I think most specifically, one of the things that I saw was a statement from them in this ad campaign that says the FCC is trying to control who can appear on the show. And obviously, look, Disney has a lot of high-priced lawyers, so I would assume that they understand the law. And the law is actually very clear. Even if you're not bona fide news, the law simply requires the offering of comparable time and placement. It doesn't dictate that you have to be on any particular show. So to the extent that was a statement of law, that's not consistent with what the law provides. To the extent more generally they were just making a statement that the FCC wants to control. Again, our position is that we are enforcing the provisions of the Communications Act that Congress has passed. And there's a version of this where, Disney has a dispute with the law that Congress has passed, and that's fine, but, Congress is the forum for that. We're going to apply the law. Again, we have not made a decision one way or the other. We're open-minded. We'll see what they say. But that was, I think, probably the basis for some of those comments.
Thank you, Chairman.
Chairman Ted Johnson from Deadline. Question again on the Disney proceedings and following up. How will you actually evaluate the public comments? And if sentiment is overwhelming in one way or the other, how do you see your obligation in terms of how you make an ultimate decision?
Look, I think whenever you see an uptick in comments in any FCC proceeding, it could be an indication of public interest in it. And I do think that there are portions of our media policy that it is wonderful and great to have broad participation, to have people expressing their views. Again, this isn't necessarily that out of the ordinary for the FCC when we go through proceedings in which there is a lot of public interest. We've done it with net neutrality multiple times. We've done it with other proceedings. We have our ways of combing through the comments, and we evaluate the merits of what people are saying. We look at the facts and the arguments that are being presented. This is what we do day in and day out. Maybe it's more comments than we normally get, but not entirely unprecedented when you get issues that break above the media noise floor, and we'll work through it. Again, full steam ahead wherever the facts and law take us.
But if it is overwhelming one way or the other and you vote the other way, is there some legal ramification?
The general APA standard is you have to identify and you have to respond to all significant arguments that are made in the record. It's not necessarily simply a matter of counting, 51% of people said this and 49% of people said that. The APA lays out the standard for the FCC. And again, we do this all day, every day, whether it's a small number of comments, 51, 49, a large number of comments. We go through it, and we ultimately make a decision based on the facts and the law. And what matters is the merits of what people are saying, what are the facts they're bringing to bear, what are the legal arguments that we're making. And again, the FCC does this all day, every day, and we'll work through it again.
Jeremy Barr from The Guardian. I think some of my fellow media reporters have kind of characterized ABC's response as very strong with these legal memos, with this whole PR campaign you mentioned. What do you make of the sort of the vociferously, not combative, I'm trying to think of the right word, but ABC has responded strongly and solicited the public's help in trying to push back on the FCC. I guess, what do you make of ABC's overall strategy here?
About this that surprises me. I think the strategy they've run, again, is just a fairly, standard off-the-shelf strategy. They've got their DC-based comms teams and comms shops that they use, and I think this is a fairly standard play at this point, and we're full steam ahead. They want to do more on the PR side, great. They don't want to do it, great. It's not ultimately going to really influence what we do. The comments that come in, we're going to look at that. The arguments people make, we're going to look at that. But we're moving ahead. And again, this is a fairly standard playbook at this point.
Just one more quick question. I mean, how are you concerned that the license renewal process and the petitions to deny, I know there's sort of different deadlines and back and forth, it could go to a hearing. I guess, are you concerned that the renewal issue with ABC could drag on for years if there's court fights over it, and that it could be something that runs on for a very long time?
I mean, look, there's really nothing that worries me about it. We're going to follow the process. I don't know that it's a years-long process that would be required here one way or the other. But again, it's not been decided at the FCC yet whether to renew the licenses, whether that we can't make a finding to renew them, and therefore you set it for a hearing through a hearing designation order. Again, at this point, all options remain on the table, and it will be dictated by the facts and the law. And we just got to go forward. If it's short, great. If it's long, great. But we got to apply the Communications Act and the provisions to these providers. And again, it's not just Disney. I know Disney is the big focus for everybody, but we've got a number of efforts on the media policy front where we're reminding people that there are unique public interest obligations that come with being a broadcaster, and you're going to be held accountable. And we think the way Congress envisioned. But we're doing a lot on the media policy space, separate from Disney. We're also doing even more than the media policy space on other efforts at the agency that are really important, significant, but I understand how the media works and what gets clicks and interest, so it's fine.
Thanks.
Hi, good afternoon. Chairman Carr, my name is Terrell Wright. I'm with the Wall Street Journal. Do you think that, or do you regret opening the View probe for public comment? Will it slow down the process that you're doing, or will it make it noisier?
Well, I've said it a couple times to reporters, and some have been oddly taken it seriously, that I have a no regrets tattoo that's like just below the collar line. It is actually a joke, and one reporter at least thought it was serious. They filed a petition for declaratory ruling, Disney did, on The View, asking the FCC to declare that it is a bona fide news program, and it's standard practice when someone files a petition like that to put it out for comment and let the public see it. It's out there for everyone to comment. We've been very open about it, and we're running standard process there. So yeah, no regrets at all about that. We're just full steam ahead on it.
And secondly, who is your favorite character on The View? or not character, your favorite cast member, I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's a new show. Yeah, a good question for which there'll be no comment.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. Kelsey Griffiths with Bloomberg News. Wanted to see if we could get a couple updates on two things. So first, when do you expect to have a decision on approving the foreign financing for Paramount Warner Brothers? Secondly, on that topic, do you have any concern about Saudi Arabia, a country that has executed at least one journalist, owning a 20% stake in that company?
Well, here we're running, standard process, and we have not made a decision. We are running our own public process where people can comment. There is a team telecom process. I think I might have said CFIUS at one point. There's a team telecom process that is running, and we will go where the facts take us based on those reviews. And again, foreign ownership is not necessarily a novel thing. We had an issue at the end of the Biden administration where a Soros-backed group was buying a very large radio station group, and there the administration sort of put the cart before the horse and approved it without actually running the standard team telecom process. We've done the opposite of that. We're running the standard team telecom process first, and I understand some people are saying that we should do process, but we are in fact doing the exact process that was not run during the Biden years on the Soros-backed one. So again, we're running the process. We'll see what Team Telecom says. We'll see what our own proceeding shows, and then we'll make a final decision.
So no concerns at this moment about the maybe character or press practices for some of these owners?
Well, we just haven't made a decision at this point. So whatever the facts are, we'll go with them.
Great. I know I'm pushing my luck here, but I did also want to ask you if you can update us on anything you specifically saw in Disney's responses, in your words, that were disingenuous. Will you be releasing any documents or anything that will help to sort of back up what you're saying that you saw in Disney's responses that escalated?
Yeah, I think we covered this sort of last press conference, but in essence, we had been working with Disney on their responses to our subpoenas, and they had been allowed within a portion of a prior response to narrow their production. And then in response to a subsequent production, they applied the previous narrowing, which was only for a subset of a prior production. It was very clear that there was no such limiting here, and they asked for more time in order to do it. So it was, in our assessment, sort of a disingenuous way to engage with the FCC, and we had some back and forth with them about that, and we have pushed them to cure some of the production issues.
Chairman Matt Daneman, Communications Daily. Can you discuss conversations you're having or been having with the White House about picking nominees for the 2 open FCC seats? Do you anticipate the administration doing something post-June 30th with regards to those openings or to Commissioner Gomez's expiring term? And has the staffing commission of the commissioners, how has that impacted operations of the agency? And a follow-up, what does the tattoo say?
That's right. Well, look, no news to break or share on that first piece of it, but I think we've been working really well. I mean, again, I've been a commissioner, chair since 2017, then commissioner, now chair, and I've sat basically on every single seat on the dais up here. I've been in lots of different compositions of the commission, from 5 to I think at least momentarily 2 at the agency. And look, when I was in the minority, I thought 4-2-2 was a pretty good number. At this point, 3 is, not as bad as 4 in my perspective, but I've lived under lots of different compositions, and we've been doing great work, and we're busier than ever, we're more productive than ever, and again, the vast majority of what we do is unanimous and bipartisan, so I think we've been working really well up to now, so.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. Brianna Frank with USA Today. You mentioned a couple of minutes ago that you're doing a lot more with media policy beyond Disney. Can you expand on that?
But I said I'm doing a lot more outside of media policy, too, as well.
Right.
I can expand on that if you want.
But are there other companies or networks that you have concerns about related to equal time rules or DEI, things along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, look, we have lots of concerns with different entities that interact with the FCC, and again, Disney's not the only one. Before we did Disney's early renewal, we did an early renewal for a broadcast group called Bridge News. They are in the middle of their pleading cycle as well, and we'll see where things go there. That had to do with concerns about potential ownership changes, but we're taking actions on lots of areas. There was a radio station in Mississippi, again, that we didn't do an early renewal, but we did a short renewal to make sure they're complying with the public interest standard, and so we're not targeting any one entity or any one segment. We're just holding all broadcasters accountable to their public interest obligations. And to the extent the FCC had walked away from that for several years or decades, I don't know, I can't speak to that, but here we're going to hold broadcasters accountable. Broadcast licenses are not property rights. If there's nothing you can ever do to lose a broadcast license, and it's not a license, it's a property right or even more than that. And so that's sort of our mindset and our approach to this.
Chairman Carr, Wesley Brown with MLEX. On the topic of Paramount and the foreign ownership, what are some key aspects that the FCC is looking at in the review of that? And then also, is there much that that Paramount could do to assuage any concerns, or is it something that's probably more cut and dry with it being the foreign ownership?
Well, we put the document out there that tees all these issues up. Have not gotten a report yet from the team on what we're seeing in response, and obviously the team telecom process is still running, so we're open-minded with no final decision on those issues at this point.
Hi, Josh Kosman, Capital Forum. Changing topic, how likely is it that in Legato's petition to switch their network that you might bring it to a full commission vote? And where is the process? The AST Legato process.
Yeah, no news to break on that front. We're running standard process on that. I mean, if you step back, what AST is doing in significant part, or maybe exclusively in the AST sector, is working on direct-to-device technology. And we think that direct-to-device, where you go straight from a LEO satellite right to a smartphone, is one of the more significant technology advancements that's going to take place and is taking place now and over the next couple of years. And one of the things that we did when we came into leadership here is we put together a plan to make sure that the United States leads the world in direct-to-device technology. You now see SpaceX Starlink has access to the spectrum that they need to provide direct-to-device. You see Amazon buying Globalstar, which could enable them to do more and better direct-to-device technology. With respect to Amazon in general, we granted them an extension of their build-out milestones, but did so with a policy framework that's incentivizing them to build and to launch. So we want multiple providers in the direct-to-device space, and the policy framework we've been putting in place is working, is delivering results, and I think it's going to be a good win for the country.
I mean, how concerned, if you don't mind a quick follow-up, how concerned are you that that spectrum is right next to GPS? As you know, others have raised concerns that it's too close to GPS. There should be a full examination. The FCC should not rush to a decision.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to rush. We're going to take a look at everything, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Oh, Chairman Carr, Dave Shepardson from Reuters. Two quick questions, if I can piggyback on that. First, on Disney, can you respond substantively to the ABC filing that the FCC has not articulated an equal opportunity standard, and that it would be unfair for the commission to take action on those grounds, and that even if it did, it would be grossly disproportional to seek to deny them an extension of their license as a result?
Well, again, a couple different issues there. One is equal time. A second is the license renewal issue. On equal time, we put out a public notice earlier this year that didn't break new ground. It simply collected the existing precedents in case law, and the FCC has been, I think, very clear about what is the line between a bona fide news program. Again, we don't make the standard up. That's in the statute itself, between a bona fide news program and something else. And there's a number of features of that test, including whether broadcasters are making decisions based on newsworthiness or based on the desire to promote or help partisan political candidates. And there's a lot of case law historically on that. This issue arose a lot in the 60s, in the 70s. It seemed to sort of go away at some point there. But all of those case laws and precedent still exist, and that's what we are going to apply here. Again, this is a decision not that the FCC made, or in particular even that I made, but Congress decided that Congress did not want broadcasters to be able to decide the outcomes of elections by favoring one partisan candidate or one political party over another. At the end of the day, Congress adopted a regime that is in favor of more speech. Let's have more people on, more debate, more information, and then we have an informed electorate that can make their decisions. So it's about more speech, not stopping speech. That's how Congress set it up. And again, we're just going to apply that standard. With respect to the license renewals, that's pending before the FCC right now. People can file petitions to deny. They can raise whatever arguments they want. Disney's attempting to demonstrate that they've operated in the public interest, and we'll see where the facts take us there.
And on a different topic, the covered list has added drones and rotors in the last 6 months. Are you considering adding Chinese-made robots or other electronic gear? There have been some reports to that effect recently.
I've seen a lot of reports that are out there on what may be next or could be next and timeline. I don't have a comment on that. Obviously, the way that the process works is that there are national security agencies other than the FCC that work through these issues and that make a determination. And our job here is ultimately ministerial. Once they make a decision, we implement it. And they make a decision, and we can move within a couple of days or so of that decision. But our job is ministerial, so there is reporting of debates taking place outside the FCC. But that's for other agencies to decide. But we've really been doing some great work on national security. If you look at American drone dominance proceeding that we have, I think a lot of what we're doing is benefiting U.S. manufacturers of drones. I was with a company, again, outside of Pontiac, Michigan, Swarm, that is producing some really interesting drones, and there's others that I've met with, and they seem to be benefiting from these restrictions on foreign-produced drones. Again, there's exceptions that we'll do to make sure we strike the right balance, but I think we have things in a good spot right now.
But do the 1260H listed additional companies listed? There's a lot of telecom tech companies that the Pentagon added recently. Does that give you any more concerns about sort of the state of the existing covered list export control restrictions?
Look, obviously our team, is in close coordination and touch with all of the other NatSec agencies, and so we're always sort of ready to take appropriate actions. So yeah. Good. Okay. Good to see you all. Thanks.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll now hand it off to my colleague, Will Wyquist, for the Bureau press conference. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everybody. So we're going to do the Bureau press conference. As you probably know, we go through the items that were adopted today. If you have questions on the items, we'll call up the bureaus to take questions specifically on those items. So given that the Wireline and Public Safety Bureaus both had 2 items, I'm going to group those together so that we don't make the teams walk back and forth. So I'm going to do both Wireline items. So if does anyone have any questions on either the Section 253 broadband deployment or the E-rate screen time? Matt? So WCB? Josh?
Hey, Matt. Chief Cavachon, thanks for the opportunity. The standard question, any notable changes between the draft and the approved item I'm not talking footnotes, but like policy changes, particularly with the E-rate item, any changes involving comment deadlines? That had been an issue that had come up from a lot of parties about extending comment deadlines. Were any changes made to that on the E-rate?
So on the E-rate item specifically, there were a few changes made between the public release draft and the draft that was voted on by the commissioners. Big ticket changes, not little footnote changes. New questions regarding the lowest corresponding price rule, the definition of a consultant and what that would encompass, just providing more detail on that, and SIPA compliance deadlines. And specifically for comment deadlines.
We did
Oh, right, they were, yeah, I'll let Allison speak to the deadlines.
So on the comment deadlines, we did extend it to, so the comment deadline would be 60 days after publication in the Federal Register, and the reply deadline would be 90 after the Federal Register.
All set? Thanks.
Any other questions on either of these items? Great, thank you all. So next up, we're going to do the Public Safety Bureau items. Do you have questions, Matt, I'm assuming? So Senji and the team can join. So these are the Next Gen 911 item and the emergency alerting items. So any questions on those would be great. Chief? What's that?
Can I say a comment?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Will, appreciate it. So I just wanted to start by saying that every emergency begins with communication. Americans either need to reach help or receive critical information. So today's two actions that you saw on 911, NG 911 transition, and also on the alerting modernization are really two efforts that modernize both of those functions. One advances the transition to NG 911, and the other enhances our security and effectiveness of emergency alerts. So I want you to take a look at them together because together they strengthen the communications lifeline of people that depend on those communications during emergencies. And I also wanted to just say that a lot of this really would not have been possible without the support of Chairman Carr and his staff and leadership, but also the extraordinary efforts of the FCC staff throughout the agency, as well as our public safety professionals that support these systems day in and day out. But questions?
Chief Nakazawa, thank you much for the opportunity. Same sort of standard question between the draft and the final, the approved item. Any big ticket items,
So
changes?
I think one was made from the looking at the NG 911 transition item. One edit that was made was with respect to the certifications. So we did have a movement from the annual certification to moving away from the annual certification of reliability standards, and we're looking to have changes that are only rise to a material change, in which case they would be required to make submissions. But David, anything else to add on that?
Yeah, just basically that was the one substantive change in the NG 911 item, was to provide a little bit more clarity. Commissioner Trustee mentioned this in her remarks, that provide a little bit more clarity in terms of what's a material update and what is the timeline for a provider that has to file an update. How much time do they have to do it?
Yep, thanks.
Any other questions on these items?
All right, thank you.
And last but certainly not least, the International Office's submarine cable item. Matt, so Tom and thank you. Chief.
Chief Sullivan, you already know the question. I'm curious if there were any changes SLTE licensing-wise. This has obviously been an issue where you got a lot of feedback, a lot of industry opposition. Did that change the material terms of how the agency is going about SLTE licensing in the item, as well as other items in the other parts of the item as well?
Well, I can say there were changes in the item, mostly as a result of, I'd say, requests from different offices. So with respect to substantially enhancing or whether they dealt with the SLTE or not, I think we're going to have to wait to see how, when the original order comes out or not. did you have any?
Yeah, no substantial edits to the SLTE portion, just responses to ex partes and some requests from Commissioner Gomez and Trustee, but nothing specifically as it relates to SLT. Maybe some minor wording here and there, but nothing substantial.
Nothing shifting the policy.
Yeah, exactly.
Recommendation, yeah. Okay.
Any other questions on this?
What about as the Chinese companies, were there any changes on that, either for comfortless companies or companies abroad or large?
No, I think that stayed very stable.
Anything else on this one? Great, thank you. Great, and with that, I will hand it off to Commissioner Gomez. Thank you all.
Hi. Thank you all for being here. We just watched this commission vote on a proposal that threatens one of the most successful education programs in this country. I want to take a few minutes to explain why the vote is part of a much larger pattern. This commission likes to talk about deregulation, but that agenda has a very selective target list. For industry insiders and billionaire buddies of this administration, the barriers keep coming down. For ordinary Americans, working families, students, and vulnerable consumers, the regulatory squeeze is getting tighter by the day. E-rate is the latest example, but it is far from the only one. The Lifeline program exists to make sure that seniors, people with disabilities, rural residents, and low-income families can afford to stay connected to work, to school, to health care, and to emergency services. More than 8 million families rely on it, and what is this commission doing? Proposing to layer on new eligibility barriers that will raise phone and internet bills for Americans who legally qualify and simply cannot afford to lose it. And now E-rate is in the crosshairs. For 30 years, E-rate has connected schools and libraries across this country. E-rate is what makes sure that every child in a low-income neighborhood or a rural community has the same shot at a digital education as anyone else. Today, this commission voted to put that at risk, wrapping a fundamental attack on educational equity in the language of screen time concerns, when the honest question on the table was far simpler. Do we believe every child deserves access to the tools of modern learning or not? On one side, we have the FCC making it harder for vulnerable families to afford a phone, an internet bill, and access the internet. On the other, we have an FCC that cannot move fast enough to hand billionaire buddies of this administration everything they want. Look at the Paramount Warner Brothers Discovery merger. Foreign governments, including sovereign wealth funds controlled by the same Saudi prince who ordered the murder of a Washington Post journalist, are positioned to own nearly half and possibly up to 100% of one of America's largest broadcast and media companies. This is a fundamental question about who owns America's public airwaves, and all signs point to another billionaire buddy bypass without a full commission vote and without proper vetting of these national security concerns. And then there's The View. For more than 20 years, The View has operated under a bona fide news exemption that the FCC itself recognized and that has been settled law through multiple administrations across both parties. That exemption was granted by Congress to protect editorial independence and the free flow of information, values that sit at the core of the First Amendment and at the heart of what this agency is supposed to protect. By my most recent count, though I am certain that number is higher now, we have received more than 44,000 comments on this proceeding, and the overwhelming majority support maintaining those editorial protections. But let's not pretend that the public's opinion will have an impact on the outcome. I suspect this FCC will cherry-pick the submissions of partisan organizations to support its goal of silencing critics. You'd have to look no further than the NRCC and the NRSC, two congressional campaign committees, which filed comments in a federal regulatory proceeding supporting the targeting of a daytime television program. If that is not the textbook definition of politically motivated censorship, I do not know what it is. The American people deserve a commission that fights for them. What they have now is one fighting against them. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Hi, Sarah Friedman, Inside Cybersecurity. You mentioned that you had some changes to the submarine cable item, and I wanted to see if any of them were related to cybersecurity and if you could elaborate on that.
No, they were not related to cybersecurity. They were just suggestions on. Oh, actually, I have my notes here. We removed the delegation of authority to conduct rulemakings, because I believe that that is something that only the commission can do. We also made adjustments to address some industry concerns, such as the timing for entities that could qualify to use the new streamlined processes.
Thank you.
Hi, Commissioner Gomez. Ariel
Hey.
Hickson with MS Now. Talking about ABC in The View. Any response to reports that there have been over 16,000 comments from the public after ABC launched a campaign against the FCC, especially as the public appears to be expressing concerns on various platforms moving forward? What are your thoughts about that campaign and how the public is responding?
So we're at over 44,000 now. But again, that's the last time I checked, which was earlier today. So that, I have been speaking out against this administration's attempts to use the FCC to control speech and to take away the editorial independence of our broadcasters. And this FCC has been doing exactly that. And I've been talking about this since the beginning of the administration. It's clear that there's a coordinated campaign of what I call censorship and control. There's been a couple of times when it's actually broken through to the public what this administration is doing. And they both relate to television content, right? There was the Jimmy Kimmel incident when the public realized that the FCC was threatening a show because they did not like the content of the show, because this administration doesn't like Jimmy Kimmel. And they wanted to pressure Disney to take him off the air. And the public responded, and they were not happy about it. Well, here again, we are using FCC processes in order to go after The View because this administration doesn't like The View. And the public is reacting, and that is what we're seeing in these thousands of comments that we're getting from the public. And that's a good thing, because everyone needs to speak out to protect the First Amendment and to protect the freedom of the press, because it's fundamental to our democracy. So I am happy to see that many people are engaged enough that they want to file comments on this issue.
From seeing this response, any chance that the FCC is going to change in any other way or respond or rethink its strategy moving forward?
I would love for the FCC to comply with its requirements, not to censor, and with the First Amendment.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ted Johnson from Deadline. What obligation do you see that the FCC has in evaluating these comments that were filed in the View proceeding? I mean, it's no different than any other public comment proceeding, but do you feel that there is a legal obligation if comments are overwhelming one way or the other?
Oh, so, by the way, let's talk about what happened with this petition for declaratory ruling, which is the subject of these comments, right? The FCC declared that our decades of precedent be damned. The bona fide news exemption required broadcasters to file these petitions for declaratory ruling. Disney was specifically told it had to file a petition for declaratory ruling. Disney already had a ruling that the View was, I did not call it The Voice, I just want you to note that. I always call it The Voice. That The View was in fact a bona fide news interview program that Therefore, it qualified for the exemption under the law. But this FCC said, we want you to file anyway. Why? Because this is about ginning up opposition. This is about pressuring Disney. And this FCC is just itching to find that it is a partisan program. I mean, hence we got those exact comments from the NRCC and the NRSC. So all of this, to me, is theater in order to pressure Disney. Nonetheless, your question is a technical, legal question about our obligation to review comments. Our obligation is to review comments and to respond to them. The number doesn't matter. I've talked about enforcement by mob when the FCC tries to gin up opposition. And, just because I happen to agree with what these commenters are saying doesn't mean that I'm going to change that. We have the obligation to address all of the comments, but not to count and decide just because it's a vote.
If I could ask one more question on a different topic, and that is the foreign ownership review that is going on with the Paramount Warner Brothers merger. Should a group of Democratic senators are urging the FCC to prohibit the deal from closing until that review is completed. How do you see that?
I think it's very important. The foreign ownership at issue here is very concerning, and I've talked about this. Actually, I think I talked about it in my remarks just now. Even if it's indirect foreign ownership, which is what is proposed here, when you have the sovereign wealth funds of these countries providing billions and billions of billions of dollars, it's going to affect the decisions about what content to provide on these large media platforms. And I think that should concern all of us. This is not a bankruptcy, right? The commission, when a company is emerging from bankruptcy, the commission will approve the emergence from bankruptcy, but it will hold off on approving the foreign ownership until after the Team Telecom has had a chance to review it and a decision has been made on whether a waiver of the foreign ownership limits is something that is in the public interest. That's not the case here. So I absolutely agree that this transaction should not move forward until we get a full review of the foreign ownership and whether it's in fact in the public interest for the FCC to grant such a massive stake, possibly up to 100%, of foreign ownership in our U.S. media.
Paramount has this deadline of September 30th to close the transaction. Do you expect that foreign ownership review to be completed before then?
Under the traditional Team Telecom process, I'm trying to do the math really quickly in my head. You said end of September, July, August. It should be. Am I doing the math right? 4 months? It's 120 days, right? And it's been over there for... Oh, okay. Not clear, you'd have to probably look into what...
Yeah, it's a little over.
I'm sorry about that. It doesn't mean they have to take all that time. But let's be clear, DOJ already gave the bypass to this billionaire. So we'll see whether there's actually any kind of a true consideration of the national security implications by Team Telecom. I think the FCC has every right to independently also determine whether it's in the public interest for foreign governments to have such significant influence on our media. That is exactly what Congress did not want when it prohibited foreign government ownership, direct ownership of U.S. broadcast licenses. Just because this is indirect doesn't mean that it's not influence that we should be worried about. 100% is what they're asking for.
Thank you.
Hi, Jeremy Barr from The Guardian. I know it's sort of early to talk about this, but I guess are you concerned that ABC won't really get a fair shake when it comes to the license renewal issue, that whether it goes to an ALJ or I guess the commissioner could do a hearing, but are you concerned that the deck is stacked against ABC and they won't actually be able to, that the merits will not factor into the decision about the licenses.
It is so clear that this early license renewal is being done to pressure Disney. This whole diversity, equity, inclusion investigation is a pretext. I could break down how ludicrous it is that we're in the middle of an investigation of them over something that the FCC does not actually have authority specifically, which is employment discrimination practices of our regulatees, because we have been told time and time again by the courts that we don't have authority over this. The FCC is not the EEOC. So this is all designed to pressure Disney to cave. Now, Disney, as we have seen, is not caving. In fact, Disney has found the courage and made it very clear that it intends to defend its rights throughout this process and all the other processes that are being thrown at it. Your question is, do I feel like they're not going to get a fair shake? They're not getting a fair shake today. It's clear in their response.
Commissioner Matt Danneman, Communications Daily. During the E-rate proceeding, in your comments, you talked about the national priority of AI. I'm curious, what's that mean for? There have been proposals for federal moratorium on data center establishment. Is that problematic? Are there things the FCC could or should be doing to promote AI development in the U.S.? Thank you.
I think when I talk about the cognitive dissonance of this administration, where in the one hand it talks about let's just go all out on AI and we're going to give the AI providers everything they want. We don't want any regulation of AI. Everything is AI, AI, AI. In fact, if you look at our submarine cable item, one of the things that we talk about is how important it is for AI. But on the other hand, trying to take away the tools that our communities will use for participation in the AI economy and that students will use for participation in the AI economy. It's just contradictory and it doesn't make any sense to me. I'm not aware of any FCC action on data center moratoria.
I'm sorry, it might have sounded a little conflicted. I know Representative Pallone has talked about a data center moratorium. I'm asking about that, but also broadly, are there things the FCC could or should be doing for AI development that as a broader policy approach?
I mean, to me, it's all about getting all communities connected to high-speed, high-capacity, low-latency broadband that can actually then participate in the AI economy. You need that connectivity in order to be able to participate. And if we don't have that, then we're leaving communities behind. That is where I think the FCC factors into the AI discussion.
Hi, Commissioner. Brianna Frank with USA Today. Following up on some earlier questions, a couple of weeks ago you said your message to Disney was don't flinch, fight. They've launched this campaign. They've received tens of thousands of comments, but you also said earlier that you thought this FCC would simply cherry pick comments to support its belief. So to what extent do you believe these efforts from Disney and from its viewers taking the time to submit these comments are futile? I mean, do you still encourage people to submit comments even if you think the FCC will sort of do what it wants to do either way?
As you said, I was very glad to see Disney push back because I have been calling for the broadcasters to stand up and protect their rights, because if they do, they will win. They will win in court, and that is what they are doing. But they are also using the court of public opinion to make clear what's happening and what this administration is doing. I'm glad to see them fight. They need to do that, and it sends a message to the other broadcasters too. They can either stand up for the freedom of the press and the freedom of speech, or they can surrender. And I would rather they do the former.
Commissioner Wesley Brown with MLEX on the topic of Paramount. I guess comparing to previous moves to try and waive foreign ownership and whatnot. Are there any past instances or anything where, you think a company like Paramount could make commitments or changes or anything to, make a deal like this go through, or is it something that you find very cut and dry and, it'll either be in the public interest or not?
Well, I mean, I suppose it could say no to all this foreign ownership that I'm so concerned about and simply do what it originally offered, which was that, Larry Ellison will fund instead.
Hi, Commissioner. I'm Maggie Rhodes from the Capitol Forum. I was wondering, some analysts have suggested Amazon's offer may undervalue Globalstar's terrestrial spectrum assets. Is the valuation of those spectrum licenses relevant to the FCC's public interest review? Thank you.
That's a very good question. In fact, no. We don't take into account the valuation of the assets when we look at the public interest. When we do these reviews, we look at two things. We look at the benefits and the detriments to any particular transaction. And we address them in whatever final decision we make. But the valuation of the assets is not something we look at. I'm right about that, right? Okay.
Commissioner Gomez, two questions. Dave Shepardson from Reuters. First, the Supreme Court could rule as early as tomorrow about whether the administration has the authority to remove members of independent agencies. How concerned are you that your job could be at risk once that ruling comes down, or do you think because of some of the structure of the FCC requires 3 commissioners, and that maybe they're not as willing to fire you as others?
Mm-hmm.
We can start with that.
What's that Mark Twain quote, or paraphrase it? The rumors of my death have been greatly exaggerated. I'm still here, and I intend to continue to fight for consumers, to promote innovation, and to protect free expression for as long as I can. We've talked before about why I'm still here, and I don't know, but I'm assuming the quorum is a good reason.
And can I just ask you about something that I asked the chairman about? So in ABC's filing on the early renewal applications, they argued that 2 points, that there are no clear rules from the commission on equal opportunity requirements, and that even if the company had violated those, which they don't agree with, that revoking their licenses would be grossly disproportionate to the offense. I wonder if you could look at that or address that, and whether you think that the basis, if there's any potential legitimate basis to revoke their licenses as a result of proceeding outside of something that has not yet been filed.
Well, as I said before, this is a pretext. This is nothing to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion policies and programs. Never mind the fact that, no, we do not have rules or authority over hiring practices of companies. And we've been told that. We have precedent to that. In fact, from when I was a staffer at the FCC, I remember being slapped back because of attempts by this administration, by prior administration, to address employment practices. And the court said the FCC is not the EEOC. We are bound by the Communications Act. So what the FCC is doing here is they are using this diversity, equity, and inclusion investigation as an excuse to pressure Disney into caving. And that is what I believe is happening here.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, guys.